Hi, I'm Jonathan McKee, and today we're going to talk about understanding youth culture. In other words, as we look at young people and the world they live in, what are some of the ideologies, philosophies, theologies they are gleaning from the world around them? There was a recent report from Common Sense Media that examined exactly how many hours a day young people were absorbing entertainment, media, and technology. And the results were that young people are absorbing a ton from these sources. As a matter of fact, when they looked at the lives of 13 through 19-year-olds, they averaged almost 9 hours a day. As a matter of fact, 8 hours, 56 minutes to be exact. When they looked at the lives of 8 through 12-year-olds, they're absorbing almost 6 hours to be exact, 5 hours and 55 minutes a day when you combine all the TV, music, internet, video games, apps, all that. The question we might ask as youth workers who care about young people is, what are they gleaning from these sources? What kind of messages are they hearing? As young people are forming these, philosophies and theologies in their head, what are they learning from Adam Levine and their favorite TV show and the conversations they're having in the chat rooms they're engaged in? We as youth workers need to be engaged in the world of youth culture. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you that you need to pay so much attention to that you aren't even paying attention to truth, like God's Word. I'm not saying that you need to download all of Rihanna's music and listen to it all the time and watch the newest 50 Shades, movie just for research. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that we need to be familiar with the ideas that young people are absorbing day to day. Let me give you a scriptural example. In Acts chapter 17, the Apostle Paul models this for us really well because he wanted to reach a group of people that were completely saturated in secularism. It was the people of Athens, and if you think about Athens, there's an import-export going on in that town, so a lot of different ideologies flowing through there. As a matter of fact, they had so many different gods and idols around that town because they basically lived in this world where everything was okay and everything is right. Sound familiar? So the Apostle Paul wanted to reach out to them. And in order to do that, he thought, let me become familiar with their world. So he literally just walked around the town and he just kind of looked at the idols, listened to what the pagan poets were saying. And again, he didn't start worshiping their idols and absorbing it day after day. He just literally took a look and saw what idols were being offered. Kind of listened to some of the lyrics as he's walking through Walmart that day and listened to what they were saying. Matter of fact, if you look in Acts chapter 17, verse 28, you'll hear him quote in his very famous message on Mars Hill. He quotes and says, as some of your own pagan poets have said, and there in quote marks, you hear him say, we are his offspring. You know what that quote is right there? That's music lyrics from Lil Wayne. Well, not Lil Wayne, it's whoever Lil Wayne was 2,000 years ago. Little Antonius. He quoted Little Antonius lyrics right there, and it's actually in the Bible. Why? Not because he listened to Little Antonius every day in his Beats by Dre headphones. It's because he happened to be walking through Walmart that day and heard Little Antonius and said, hey, I can use that. And then he used that in his message to springboard conversations about truth. Are we doing that in our ministry? Are we learning about where kids are at and the messages they're hearing? And can we sometimes use that in conversations to talk about the truth of the Word of God? Well, I'll tell you what. Today I want to just give you 4 tips to becoming familiar with youth culture. The first tip is simply this. Be engaged in constant recon. Yeah, think of yourself like a soldier who has to go out and do recon. And if we're about to be a missionary out in this mission field, what I'm asking you to do is just get to know your mission field. Recon can be a lot of fun because sometimes it's actually just going and just hanging out where kids are at and just listening. It's powerful when we as adults actually just pay attention to what young people are talking about. I tell parents this all the time in parent workshops. For example, when parents are carpooling, I say, just listen. Don't, take the conversation and put it around you. Maybe sometimes just drive in silence and open up your ears. Because any parent who's done this knows that kids will start talking and they'll forget you're even there. You'll hear kids starting to talk about stuff in their world, and you will learn a lot about a kid. As a matter of fact, as a parent, sometimes you'll hear one kid start to say something, and then you'll hear your own kid say, shh, 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 shh. And that's when your German Shepherd ears need to really perk up and you need to go, "Ooh, what did they just say?" Because that's when they're really talking about the good stuff. Well, we as youth workers, we can be doing the same thing. Sometimes whether it's in the youth room or whether we're sitting at the lunch table on campus, listen to what they're talking about. But it goes more than that. I do encourage you to, as you're walking through Target or the grocery store, if you hear a song that you've heard played 20 different times, maybe Google those lyrics and say, could I use these lyrics to talk about truth? So be engaged in constant recon. Secondly, the second tip I want to give you to help keep familiar with this world of youth culture is have a handful of questions in your back pocket. So let's say you're driving on the street and you see a billboard. You're in Target and you see a music video playing. You're in the grocery store, you hear a song playing. Or you're hanging out with kids and they're playing a certain type of music. It's good to be able to sometimes ask a question. Again, questions are one of those things that get them talking and us listening. It makes it a dialogue, not a monologue where we're just lecturing. So throw out a question. Sometimes if we're doing this research and we kind of look and we see some of the lyrics that are being sung, or we see a show or a movie that young people are watching, we can start thinking ahead about those philosophies that are being taught, and we can come up with some questions. But more realistically, we're going to be there and something's going to happen and we're going to have to come up with a question on the fly. If that happens, remember this. One of the things you can always do if you notice something is simply ask, "Hey, what did that just say?" If you hear lyrics, "What did she just sing?" You see something. "Wait, what just happened there?" You simply ask them to observe what happened. And then just think about it and go, interesting. And here's a great question. Was he right? Just ask, was she right? "Hey, she just said this. Was she right?" Now you're asking them to basically kind of reach into their set of values and share that. Then from there, if it's appropriate, you could even say, "Well, what's the Bible say about that?" Now, remember, when we're asking these questions and stuff, we're not doing it judgmentally. We don't want to come across as this person that's, kind of the Debbie Downer in the situation. If you hear somebody who's singing about racy stuff, don't be like, "So what's that slut singing about?" No, that's not what we're trying to do here. Compassionately, empathetically go, "What did she say? What does she mean by that? Is she right?" And if we're asking this with compassion, which, by the way, might be really important because these very things that this person is singing about might be something that this young person is struggling with. And if we're all judgmental, this young person is going to be like, "Oh, this adult is not safe to be around," because they hate that. So make sure that as you're asking these questions, you're asking them with compassion and empathy, but you have a set of questions kind of in your back pocket that you're ready to ask so you can talk about truth. Thirdly, the third tip when it comes to keeping familiar with youth culture is simply keep your eyes on your six. And the reason I'm saying that is because if we're out there doing recon and we're out in this world that's kind of full of sometimes some racy stuff and some raunchy stuff, let's not be stupid and convince ourselves that we need to start saturating our own lives with these messages. No, we need to keep our eye on our six. And what I simply mean by that is that the devil is prowling like a roaring lion and he is waiting to pounce on us. And we got to be careful because at any moment he is ready to he wants to take advantage of the fact that if we're stupid enough to late at night go, "I'm going to do some research and look at some of these racy videos firsthand to see how naughty they really are," it's probably not a good idea. Again, like the Apostle Paul, we should become familiar with the culture around us. We shouldn't saturate ourselves in said culture. So keep your eye on your six. Be prayerful about this. As we're listening and getting a peek in their world, it's good to kind of be familiar with what's going on, but that doesn't mean start saturating this stuff in our lives again and again. Tip number 4, keep quality resources at your fingertips. Cool thing about the internet is there's so many great youth ministry resources out there. And there's websites devoted to youth culture. In other words, there's somebody out there doing the research for you. And it's great. You could just read an article about this. Go to cpyu.org. There's this guy named Walt Mueller who really the focus of his ministry is studying youth culture and talking about how we can use it in youth ministry. There's great youth culture resources all over. There's a place called the Youth Culture Report, and you can subscribe to their tweets and their newsletters, and they'll constantly tell you about what's going on in the world of youth culture. At our ministry, at the Source for Youth Ministry, you go to our website, my blog, and we have these youth culture window articles where we constantly keep youth workers aware of what's going on in the world of youth culture. So keep some of these resources at your fingertips, because those resources will do the research for you. I hope these 4 tips help you to stay aware of what's going on in the lives of young people today. Because when we get to know their world, we can better reach out to them. Thanks so much for what you do in the world of youth ministry.